what we want to talk a little bit about today as we celebrate Labor Day weekend, and many of us are excited that there's no school and hopefully no work on Monday and get a chance to stop and take a breath and just take a break. Hard work and hard studies and hard play, whatever it is that we can take a break from and stop and relax. I remember my first job, no story ever ends out good when you say that. I worked at Beltline Station, and if you know what Beltline Station is, it's like a Malibu games and golf from Mount Asia, where there was putt-putt and batting cages and video games. I think they actually paid me in video tokens at the time. But I had a very prestigious position. I was the go-kart specialist. And what looked like was you could pay money to go ride this go-kart, went 25, 35 miles an hour. And you get like 3 or 4 minutes around the track and all that, and so all these teenagers would go and ride the go-karts. And my job as the go-kart specialist was, when the red light came on, I was to go out to the front and say, "Stop, please park your go-kart. Please park your go-kart." Well, just imagine myself with 20, 13-year-old boys on 25-mile-an-hour go-karts. It didn't work out too well. So that's where I developed my cat-like ninja reflexes from having to dive all these go-karts that were coming at me. It was a horrible thing. I was ready to retire at the ripe old age of 16 and try to get workers' comp and all kinds of benefits you can think of. So many of us probably have very similar first job stories and whatnot. And it's so funny because I experienced burnout at an early age. I was like, "Mom, Dad, I just don't think I'm called to this working thing." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Well, are you called to driving?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. He goes, "Okay, well, that's how it works. Work, get a car. No work, no car. So if you'd like to ride the bus to school, that's totally fine." So it didn't work out too well, so I stayed at Beltline Station as the go-kart technician. I moved to technician. So here's what is going through my mind right now is that as a society, as a culture, we are extremely fried. We are extremely busy. We don't have a whole lot of margin. There's not enough time in our day, not enough days in our weeks, not enough weeks in our months, that we go, and we're exhausted. And I know the typical schedule is we have school and work Monday through Friday. Friday night is this little sport we call football, and then Saturday is various soccer, volleyball, dance, band activities, and then we reach Sunday going, "Wow, I have to do this again tomorrow," kind of like Groundhog Day, which that's a weird movie, by the way, and just throwing that out there. It kind of, messes with me a little bit. And so this is the routine, and we feel like we're stuck in this rat race. I didn't have pets as a child due to my duck incident, and so we had a hamster, though. And the hamster had that wheel that it keeps running on. And I think that's a great picture of how many of us feel. It's like, is this thing ever going to end? When is the stop? When can I take a break? And as a people, I'm worried that busyness and overworking is going to be our downfall. There's a couple of stats that talk about the American workforce. And here, I'm going to throw these up here. The average American works nearly 2,000 hours a year. 40% of Americans put in a 50-hour plus work week. And 60% of absences from work are due to stress and job burnout. What's interesting to note as well is that if you were to take the stats like this and apply them to ministers, preachers, pastors, clergy in America, those would be way under. And we're starting to see that the clergy and staff, church staffs, they're burnt out. They haven't taken care of themselves, and we're losing ministers at a rapid rate due to burnout and unhealthiness. And I think you could talk about each one of the fields that you guys are in or have been in and say, yeah, that makes sense. And it seems like we work more and more and more, and we get less productive. I feel like busyness is an epidemic in our society today, that things like rest and pace and taking breaks and having healthy boundaries are considered to be sloth, considered to be laziness, considered to be something that you don't implement. And I'm not so sure that the way of Jesus is that way. One writer, Richard Foster, said that busyness is not of the devil, it is the devil. In his book, Celebration of Discipline, trying to get us to implement spiritual practices that keep us in life with God and life with others. That busyness, it is the devil. It's not of the devil. I wrote down some thoughts about busyness, that it kills the heart. That it makes us stop caring. Maybe even you could say that it makes us stop caring about the things that we care about because we're so busy that we don't have the energy and the headspace and the time. And that busyness robs us of knowing God And that's so true because we can become so busy that we don't make time to hear from God, to commune with God, to commune with others, mainly because of busyness. The good news is that in the Scriptures, there's an alternative. God has built in a way in which we can survive this rat race mentality of life, whether if we're a student or an adult or a worker or if we're retired or not in work, whatever it might be. God has provided a way in that He included in creation so that you and I can get off this rat race of life, and it's called Sabbath. And it's a word that we hear about in Sunday school. It's a word that we hear about when we watch the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. It's a word, whatever it is, we hear this word Sabbath, and we've heard it over and over again. In fact, it's carried on through the pages of our Scripture and our story. And so it's easy for us just to put it to the side. And so before we go on, I want to, for those of you that are picture-type learners, I don't know what kind of learner I am. I don't know, I'm probably a little bit of everything. Connect the dots work really well. But for those of us that are picture-type learners, I think the metaphor that has been helping me with Sabbath is that the opportunity to enter into Sabbath, it's like as if you go up to Colorado right now and you're on a mountain, you're able to breathe in that fresh Rocky Mountain air. Can you just picture it right now? It's just beautiful. And I was there a month and a half ago, and I walked out of the airport, and I felt this strangest thing. It was a breeze. I was like, whoa, I'm going to need to get a parka or something. And then you turn around, there's all these big things in the mountains. I was like, whoa, I didn't know those existed. We landed on the moon. And it was so amazing. And so this idea of God's invitation to Sabbath is for us to take a deep breath of this fresh air and inhale it and let it go in the deepest parts of our being. And the alternative, I think, is not to embrace Sabbath or rest, is to go to a highly polluted area and just hook up to just some diesel fumes and just inhale them. Let them get all inside of you. I mean, that sounds great, doesn't it? It's just so much more refreshing than fresh Rocky Mountain air. I think that's the alternative. And my hope for today is that we would see the beauty and the necessity of Sabbath life, of God breathing fresh air into our bodies, that we would turn away and realize how despicable the alternative looks. And so we're going to go on a little journey. A lot of times... This stays in here, okay? A lot of times preacher types get up and talk a whole lot about things, and you get this idea that, man, they must memorize the Bible from cover to cover, and they must pray 15 hours a day. And when God shows up and speaks to them like in a burning bush, and their yard is just full of burning bushes, and God's like, my son, thou honored preacher. Okay, it's not the case, especially with today, because as we look at Sabbath, I'm just going to be honest, I need Sabbath for dummies. If there was a Sabbath book for dummies, I would be the first person to get it, because I am horrible in the past of my life to implement this God-given principle. And so in the past couple of weeks, as I've been studying about this, I've been learning some very interesting things about the Sabbath and things about the Sabbath and concerned with the heart of God. And so I'd love to just share with you the journey that I've been going on, and maybe we can go on this journey together as a community, as people of faith going, wow, there is an alternative way to the way that I've been living. There's an alternative way to what culture says is cultural norm of my pace and the speed of my life. And so I'm going to walk you through a couple of instances where the Sabbath is talked about in Scripture. We see that in Genesis chapter 2, we first see this principle when God got done creating the heavens and the earth, and it took him, like a chapter to do so. And then we see that the heavens and the earth and all the hosts of them were finished. On the seventh day, God ended his work, which he had done, and he rested. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work, which he had created and made. So we see that God institutes this rhythm of life, that we see that he worked for 6 days on creating the heavens and the earth and all that populated it. And then on the seventh day, he rested. He set aside this day to say, this is holy, this is sanctified, this is a day in which I'm going to rest. And it's very interesting why God did this, because it's not like God needed to take a nap after making the mountains and the heavens and the oceans. He wasn't tired. He didn't need to have a Lunchable for lunch. I miss that about school. Do y'all still get Lunchables, students? Yes? Like the pizza one, Okay, sorry, that's really cool. Sorry, it's about lunchtime. And so, okay, what were we talking about? God, Lunchable, wow. And he didn't have to rest, but he set aside this day to rest, set aside a pattern. And so we see ingrained in the beginning of our story, there's a pattern of work and rest. Next, we see in Exodus 20 in the delivery of the 10 Commandments. we see that the Ten Commandments aren't necessarily a whole bunch of rules to keep. It's more so a wedding covenant. It's wedding language where God is saying, I'm your God. I have rescued you out, and I'm now making you my people. As you're my people, don't have gods before me. Don't make idols. This relationship is going to work. There are certain things that you have to have in place with me, and it's a covenant. I'm going to keep my end of the covenant. Here's your end of the covenant. So we see the Ten Commandments as this moral code that really surfaced and formulated the whole Old Testament. The fourth commandment is remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. We see that the first couple of commandments had to do with our relationship with God, and the last had to do with our relationship with others. And some writers would say that the Sabbath commandment is the glue that holds the commandments together. That in order for us to live out this life, Sabbath is what holds it all together. This translated, honor the Sabbath day. Sabbath really means, it means rest. It means to cease. To keep it holy, what does that mean? Holy means different, set apart. And so on the rest day, the day of rest, you are to keep it different. It's supposed to be a different kind of day. Whereas work is what's going to make up 6 days. On the day of rest, on the day where you cease, you make that a different kind of day. We tracking? We good? Yes? Okay, cool. Now, then we see in Deuteronomy chapter 5, which is almost an echo of Exodus 20, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your ox, note to self, your donkey or any of your animals. Maybe in modern times it's like your Farmville ox or your Farmville donkey, maybe. We don't make them work on Sundays, all right? Nor the alien within your gates. If you have an alien in your gates, we'll pray for you afterwards, and we will call the men in black. They're going to come. They don't take off on Sabbath. They work all the time. So that your manservant and your maidservant may rest as you do. Basically, all of your household, everyone that is associated with your household, this is what you're supposed to embrace. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. And here the writer of Deuteronomy was echoing back to the Exodus account where God's people, the Israelites, were enslaved to the Egyptians. And the mark of that slavery was work and toil and labor. And they were continuously working, doing backbreaking work. And God is wanting to remind them, I am the Lord your God who delivered you from the Egyptians, where you were marked as slaves to work and slaves to labor. In order for you not to get enslaved back into work, remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. Keep it fresh. This is the day you're to set apart. Later on, we see that Jesus constantly dealt with the Sabbath. He would go and he would heal someone, and the religious leaders of the day would be upset that he healed on the Sabbath. And Jesus would say, well, would you rather me let the person not be healed than heal on the Sabbath? And he said that the Sabbath was made for mankind, not mankind made for the Sabbath. And so this principle is very crucial in our story. And as I've been thinking about it, a light bulb kind of came on, and we look at the Ten Commandments, and the majority of us would say, this is a moral code that guides my life. Many of you aren't planning on leaving this place, stopping by Cafe Express, and then going and planning on murdering someone today, right? And so if you do, then we'll have prayer for you and the alien folks at the front. This guides our life. We know that if we're going to steal, eventually we'll get caught, and that's not how we're supposed to live in a society as people of God, as humans. We understand the gravity of some of these commandments and the authority that they have with them, but why do we ignore the fourth commandment? We think that it might just be a suggestion or a good idea, but many of us are in blatant disobedience to the principle of Sabbath. We think that we can work and go and not break, not live according to God's standards. You see, because we're dust. We came from dust, we'll return to dust, and Sabbath is almost what holds us together in the meantime. And so my hope and my prayer is that we would all go, wow, I haven't been doing this, and not feel guilt or shame, but go, wow, maybe this is the way to live. For the Jewish families, they would practice Sabbath on sundown from Friday night to sundown on Saturday night. And over the centuries, what we've adopted is that we typically treat Sunday as a day of Sabbath, but Sabbath really doesn't need to be confined to a specific day. For instance, myself, I work on Sundays, and so therefore, Sabbath really wouldn't be a good day for me. And so like Fridays is where I've been trying to have my Sabbath. And it's an orientation of the heart as well as a day to recharge, a day to refuel, a day to stop and realize that our energy is not limitless, that our energy is not infinite, that we are finite people, and that we have to build rhythms of rest and break into our day. It's very important for us to grasp this. Sabbath is something that where we were reminded that we didn't create a universe and we don't have to hold it together, that God did. And that even as God in his infinite power and wisdom instituted a day of rest. We see sometimes that Jesus would be busy healing and ministering to people in all the villages he would go to. And you see these instances in the scripture where he slips away, and that it'd be a crowd was following or there was a whole town, and he would go away and he would say, no, I've got to go and recharge, refuel, connect with God. And so we see this lived out in an example of Christ. Some ideas about Sabbath is God's way of saying stop. It's a time that he's provided for us to love and to be loved. It's a way that we can go and nurture stillness. It's a day in which we enter, but it's also a lifestyle that we see. Sabbath is not so much a rule, but it's not a burden. It's actually a delight. Sabbath is a blessing. The truth, I think, that needs to get to the core of our being is that Sabbath is the best day of the week. And it kind of takes us a while, but think about this. A day set aside for you and me, our families and friends, to rest, to enjoy God, to delight in God. That is the best day of the week. And see, for some reason, I haven't seen it like that in all this time. Like, oh, well, Friday's coming. That means I got to turn my iPhone off and can't play like 6 hours of video games. No, it's really funny. There's this game, NCAA 2011 for Xbox, and it's college football. You can create your own player. So Dusty Craig is 6'6", 175 pounds, and he's the starting quarterback for the Texas Longhorns. And so like I can play with myself. It on the game. It's so great. And Mike is my running back. And one of our friends, he doesn't like University of Texas, so we made him the punter. So he gets just tackled bad on every play. It's great. And so, but Friday for me, it needs to be seen as the best possible day, because in that day, I have one day where I'm recharged, so the next 6 I can function and live abundant life. One day to rest, to recharge, 6. Do that. You say, well, I'm too busy to keep a Sabbath. No, you're too busy not to keep Sabbath. Are you tracking with me? It's a different mindset. It's a different way of thinking. And it's rooted in the patterns that God set when creation came into being. There's a golden rule of Sabbath. I think it's one that could really guide our working definition of what it is for us. It's to cease from what is necessary to embrace that which gives life. And so maybe on this journey, you could be going, okay, well, what does a Sabbath look like for me or for my family? This is a great question to ask. What is it that embrace life? What would it look like for us to embrace life? What gives me life? I'm thinking about that. What gives me life? Because when something truly gives you life, God is not far from behind it. And so for me, I have to have a time where I'm able to sit in quiet and stillness and hear from God. I need to know, like, God, what are you up to in my life? What direction do I need to be following? Where do I go with my relationships and my friendships and my job and my calling? What do you want to do with me? If I don't have that, I'm a grouch for the next 6 days. Like, you don't want to be around me, and I don't even barely know how to function, because it's like that's what's guiding me. A time to study God's word, not for a sermon. Okay, you know what I mean? For me. And so what is it that gives you life and center Sabbath around that? As families, I can think of no better thing for parents to institute than a family Sabbath and say, this day is our day. Now, did you know? Okay, this is pretty sneaky, but I can tell you since I hung out with the youths, iPods have an off button. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know, maybe it's a flaw in the design, but your kid's iPhone can come off. iPods turn off. iPads have an off button. You have even Droid, the new Droids, they can be turned off too. Isn't that crazy? And those of you BlackBerry users, did you know that you can go offline on your BlackBerry? It's a crazy thought. And that your emails, it's not like a Mission Impossible mission that's going to self-destruct. Your email can wait 24 hours. And if someone calls you, now this is crazy, if someone calls you, you don't have to call them back. Isn't that wild? Like, you don't have to call them back. And if someone sends you a text message, guess what? You don't have to text them back either. And as a family, you say, hey, you know what? We're going to be fully present with each other. We're going to laugh. When's the last time as a family or you individually that you laughed until you cried? I mean, isn't that the best feeling in the world? If you could bottle that and sell it, we'd all be millionaires. Something about laughing in such a way, it's like, I'm crying and I look like a fool and I don't care. Something about that is good for the heart. Maybe for you, Sabbath is a day where we're going to laugh. We're laughing together. Maybe Sabbath is a day where you dust off the kitchen table and have a meal together. Or as a family, you pray together. As a family, you talk about what's going on in each other's lives. Families, if you implement this day, you will start to see such growth in the spiritual lives and the overall health of your families. And Sabbath is such a way that if you're retired, you could still be not honoring the Sabbath even though you're not clocking in, so to speak. And students, even though you might not have a job, you can have Sabbath too. Not logging into Facebook for a day won't crash your computer. And you could say, I'm going to go unplugged. I think students, the word for Sabbath for you is to unplug. You just need to unplug for a little bit and just kind of go, okay, there's trees outside and they're beautiful. And I can go for a walk and I can unplug and connect with God. And students, it's so important that you start at an early age, start to find what the heartbeat of God is, and that you unplug your ears so you can start to hear from God at an early age, and you're not too young to do that now. And so Sabbath is so important. It's crucial. This isn't a commandment that we can glaze over. This is life or death here. I'm just being honest with you. This is of utmost importance. I love the analogy that Rob Bell comes up with for Sabbath. He's just great. Another preacher crush for those of you that are asking. And so he says that Sabbath is like rhythm, okay? And are there any musicians in the house? Anyone sing or play an instrument or anything? Micah does not count, okay? Yeah? So he says like this. A good musician has good rhythm, okay? And rhythm is all about knowing when to play and when not to play. And so you know when to play, when not to play. My favorite thing about the band guys, it's not what you hear, but it's what you don't hear. There's things that they're doing that you don't hear because they have rhythm. If you play all the time without stopping, it gets monotonous and dull. It sounds kind of like Slipknot or something. It's like la, 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 right? No, but you see a beautiful piece of music that it's play and rest and stop and rest and here's a note and then stop. That's how Sabbath life is. We go, 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 rest. Go, 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 rest. And it's this song that we're creating with our lives. And so what type of music are you making with your life? Does it sound good or is it just noise? 3 quick questions as I'm wrapping up that we need to ask about this. For our own lives, what do our rhythms look like? What do the rhythms of your life look like right now? If your life was a song, and I think it is, what type of song are you creating with your pace and with the way that you're living your life? Is it a beautiful melody or is it just chopped up, full of dissonance and staccato notes that don't run together and never stops? Another question is, what is the speed of my life? Like, what type of pace am I taking? And is that speed sustainable? At your current rate, could you go for the next 5 years? Or could you go for the next day? And then we have to ask the question, what type of changes do we need to make in order to have healthy rhythms? Or maybe we're out of rhythm. What changes do we need to make to get in rhythm? That's a crucial question for us as we're trying to figure out what are the rhythms of our life. For me, what this practically lives out is that maybe I don't have to say yes to everything. Did you know it's okay to say no? If we become all things to all people in the unbiblical way, we'll find that we're fried and disconnected and we're restless. Maybe some of our best work comes from not working, trusting that God can do more in 6 than we can do in 7. It's a lot like tithing. God, I'm going to give, and you can do more with less than I can do with all. You're tracking with me? And then lastly, maybe rest is actually possible. For those of you that have been living the rat race, living the life that never stops, and you can't find to get ahead, it's like it's just you're grasping at straws. Rest is possible. Rest is possible. You see, St. Augustine has this famous quote. It basically says this: "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." Could it be that is what we're all missing? The world is dying for the rest of God. And I promise you that Sabbath is how we enter into that rest where we can be still and know that God is God and that we aren't. The rest that is able to embrace the light burdens of Jesus, where he says, you will find rest for your souls. So imagine a community of people that said no to the pushes and pulls of society, saying, you have to go, you can't stop. And we said, no, we are going to stop. We're going to spend time with friends and family and loved ones and commune with God and be silent and be still. And then we'll join in for the next 6 days. But on the 7th, we stop. And so my hope is that we would all embrace this together, knowing that Sabbath lifestyle is ingrained in how we're to live as God followers.